can't attack that.
Wonderful. I feel like we're on the cusp of discovering the cure to this curse. Who would have...
I've sacrificed
Azeroth
everything.
must not fall.
What have you given?
Trust in Lord Illidan's plan.
Your Titan gods have abandoned you. Lay down your arms. There is no hope left.
can't attack that target. I can't attack that. I need to target something first.